Now, as the political crisis in Rivers State rumbles on, what could be a frightening new threat appears to be emerging from the volatile creeks of the Niger Delta. A group calling itself the Niger Delta Development issued a stark, unambiguous warning to President Tinubu: rein in the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, in his battle against the Rivers State Governor, Sim Fubara, or face coordinated attacks on Nigeria's oil installations in the Niger Delta. Attacks which would not only deal a huge blow to the Nigerian government's foreign exchange revenue, but could possibly cripple this country's ailing economy. In a statement signed at the weekend, the group expressed particular anger over an alleged plot by Mr. Wike to use a friendly judge to secure a ruling which they say would stop local government allocations to Rivers State, effectively financially incapacitating local councils in the state. So who are the Niger Delta Development Force, and how much of a security challenge could they pose? Is theirs an idle threat? Should it be taken very seriously indeed, or is it just political posturing? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from the Rivers State capital, Port Harcourt, by the editor of the Beam newspaper, Chief Obi Ndukwe, a leading Niger Delta analyst who regularly assesses developments in Rivers State. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Does this sound plausibly like an idle threat, or could we be looking at a new and frightening escalation in the Wike-Fubara conflict, one that could really threaten the security of Rivers State and the economy of Nigeria?
Yeah, well, Charles, what we are seeing is nothing different from what we've seen even in the past. I mean, these issues come up once in a while, even though for now we've had relative peace in the Niger Delta region, but it's not unusual for politicians to try to settle scores with threats, particularly from the group you call agitators or ex-militants or militants, as the case may be. But this renewed threat coming on the heels of the issue of local government allocation and all that. Well, for me, I've done my investigation. The name, that name is strange. Even the person who signed that name is supposed to be a Rivers man, if at all he exists. And funny enough, the people from that family in Abonima, Akukutori local government of the state, say they don't have that kind of person. So it's possible it's a pseudonym, and then we don't know what the intentions are, because ordinarily, in time past, we've had agitators, those who took up arms against the state, come up to own it and say, this is who we are and this is what we are fighting for. But in this case, it's not known. And I think that, well, the security agencies are not going to let it slide, whether it's just the political gimmick, to try to see how they can stop the legal matters going on. But like the president had said, and several people also said, it's a constitutional thing, and the rule of law has to prevail. So we are talking about the rule of law over versus the rule of might. So I don't think it's actually proper for anybody or any group to resort to those kind of threats of damaging the oil installations. But like I said, it's nothing new. It's something that we've always had to deal with in time past. And at the end of the day, the politicians will settle their scores, the water will go down, and then everybody will be okay. So it's really nothing new, but that's not to say that we should let it slide. But for a group to come out to threaten the federal government, threaten the military, threaten the power base of the nation calls for serious concern. And like I said, I expected to also get a response from the state government, also kicking against this threat, because I don't think it's gotten to that point where people need to come up to say they are going to bomb oil installations because somebody is fighting for his right, or somebody is actually trying to assert himself as a leader. So I think that even the state government should condemn that, in their own statement. Maybe they will still do that, I don't know. But it's over 48 hours since after this threat was made, and we've not heard any group condemning it. Apart from the move recently we heard by Pandef, trying to see how they can reconcile the different groups. Ordinarily, those who make such threats should come up and then let it be clear.
Right,
the non-ex-militant agitators, they are leading.
Right, I think you've made that point. That
there's not said anything.
Right, there's a lot of things we need to get to, so I'm going to ask you to kind of keep your answers reasonably short. I think you've made that some of the points over and over again. What I need to get a sense of, Chief Ndukwe, is the background to this. You're saying that you don't know anything about the Niger Delta Development Force, whether they're a prominent group or whether they're a faceless group, because every single newspaper in this country has covered that story. And some of them have described them as a group of freedom fighters, liberation ambassadors, all kinds of things. So they do sound as if they are to some extent known, but we will defer to your knowledge, because I know that we've spoken to you about a lot of issues out of Rivers State, and your analysis has always been pretty much spot on. But let me ask you this. Where do some of the old militant leaders fall in this crisis? Because, for example, the other day we saw, or we heard, Asari Dokubo in that viral video where he was saying that he was very angry and that he was planning to sever ties with President Tinubu, and subsequent to that, this Niger Delta Development Force came up. I'm not saying there's any connection, but I'm wondering if you've detected any links at all that might link people like himself or some of the other old guard leaders of militant groups in the Niger Delta to this Niger Delta Development Force.
Yeah, for Asari, I know he's vocal. If he's involved, you will know. He doesn't need to hide. He doesn't need to come under a smoke screen to say, oh, I'm going to do this. If he's taking up any issue, he's vocal about it. He's not going to hide. Same thing with some of the other leaders. Some of them, very many of them have become involved in politics. Some have even been elected as House of Reps members, House of Assembly members. Some have taken up political appointments, and they are living the normal lives outside the creek, So I don't think there's actually any connection between those old order and what we're having. But one thing about the Niger Delta is that sometimes you wake up and you see a breakaway faction. You see people trying to build their own army, and that way you may not be able to actually control what they do. So it's not, I don't see any synergy yet between the old order and this current group that we have now. So, but it's not, like I said, we are not going to rule it out because anybody could have been behind it. And don't also rule out the fact that it could be a politically sponsored statement. We have seen it in the past where people just use pseudonyms and make threats, thinking that by so doing, it will help them to, get whatever they want. So until, we get information from the security agencies, and don't forget that we also have Ojuka Flaga Makri, who is the Director of Energy Security in the Office of the National Security Advisor. He's a product of the struggle. He was strong in the IYC stuff, and I think he knows his terrain. And from the information I got from him, they've not been able to also link this group, this threat, to any particular group. So at best for now is a faceless group. It's not, I wouldn't want to link it to any of the people that we know that could have been doing this now.
But I mean, you make some very interesting points there. One of them is that there are periodically reactionary groups springing up, even if the older guard are transitioning to politics. You could have newer disgruntled groups coming up, couldn't you? And it would be a bit of a problem, isn't it, if everyone is taken by surprise by this group?
Of course. Yeah, of course, it's going to be a problem. But let me also tell you something. You see, for those of us who live here and have done business here, we understand this. We have practiced journalism here. We've been involved. We know them, practically almost every one of them involved in the struggle, those who have retired and those who are still doing some stuff, you know. One thing I want to let you know is that for now, the security apparatus we have in the region in terms of surveillance of the pipelines given to Tantita and then sublet to some other leaders of the ex-militant groups, I do not think there's a possibility for any group to go against this very strong team, you know, to go ahead to do this. And like I said, you can't run in from probably another state and move into another state and then begin to grandstand. So what we are seeing is probably a creation of people from this state, not outsiders. And it is important to find out if they actually exist, who is funding them, who is behind them, what is actually their interest. Because the issues here are clearly political. It's not like they are fighting for justice and equity and all that. So anybody who is making such threats probably is involved politically. And that's the truth of the matter, because this, the battle for control in Rivers State has basically nothing to do with the militant groups, whether ex-militants, agitators, freedom fighters, liberators, or what you have. It's purely political. And I don't want to associate anybody, I don't want to accuse anybody, but it's obvious that somebody somewhere is trying to create an imaginary group, and then maybe some persons can also buy into it and then begin to use it. So the government really needs to step in, because we can't afford to have that crisis situation. At the same time, we cannot afford to have people threaten the judiciary, threaten the government, and say, look, you don't need to do this. The matters before the courts are purely legal. And as far as I'm concerned, whoever wins the matter, whoever wins the case, well, that is it. While I do not subscribe to the idea of withholding local government allocation, but I'm also not in support of getting things done outside the framework of the law. If the law courts have said, this is what you need to do, I think there's a provision for you, if you don't like the judgment of the court, to go and try to vacate it. Now, but a situation where people are resorting to some kind of self-help by trying to read things that we have overcome in the past. It's a long time we've not had this kind of thing in Rivers State and even in the Niger Delta. So it's going to be a new thing coming up, and then I think that the government needs to nip it in the bud as fast as possible.
Okay, well, you've made again some very illuminating points there. So this could be, as you suggested, political posturing, or it could be real. In either case, given the fact that we've had a fairly stark warning from this group, and knowing the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, as you do you see him backing off as a result of this warning?
I mean, what are we even saying? Backing off how? In all of my analysis, if you remember, Charles, I hardly dwell on Wike, because the issues are not about Wike. There is no case in court, before any court, where Wike is a party. That's the truth of the matter. It's actually purely a matter between the government, the governor, and the state assembly. Once that is resolved, all these names we are flaunting will just, fizzle out. So a situation where somebody is threatening somebody who is not even a party in any of the over 30 cases in court, I mean, it's just preposterous. And then to say you are going to threaten somebody, don't forget, they are all Niger Delta people. I mean, they've all been in the system. They've all been in the struggle. Nobody has monopoly of these things. I mean, I'm not going to accuse anybody of building any structure or system to threaten, but I can tell you that nobody will back off because there are threats. Nobody will back off. And And as far as I'm concerned, the judiciary is not interested in all that. What they'll be looking at are the issues before the court, and the threats are not before the court. And let me also let you know, we've had this kind of situation in the past. This is not the first time. I think during the 2007 debacle, when Amechi was trying to pursue his mandate, I mean, there were threats of if the Supreme Court gives judgment in favor of Amechi, oh, they are going to do this and all that. The moment the Supreme Court gave its judgment, the whole street of Port Harcourt was a wild jubilation. And everybody, nobody did it. There was no matchstick, there was no knockout, there was no gunshot. And quickly, people moved in to align with the new order. Once there's a new sheriff, everybody moves in. So it's not it. It's also expedient for even the state governor, because he's the man in charge in Brick House right now, whether you like it or not. He also has what it takes to bring everybody together and then calm the situation. He actually knows what to do and then avert all these unnecessary threats. It's not a big deal. For me, it's a matter of concessions here and there, and this whole thing will level down. That's all. So it's not, nobody's going to back off because somebody is pulling threats. I mean, people can bring up their own groups and also issue statements here and there. Oh, what if some people come up and say, if the governor doesn't do this, we're going to do that. But nobody is going to do that. Right. I don't think that even UK
let me just come in
chosen
there.
that form. Yeah.
Right. Let me come in there, because I mean, you're downplaying what we all know is a fairly combative situation in Rivers State. I mean, we've seen statements from both the governor and Mr. Wike, and they clearly are at each other's throats. I mean, I don't think anybody can doubt that or question that. So it really doesn't. It doesn't fit when we try to downplay something that is obvious to everybody, basically, what is going on. I mean, you mentioned PAN-DEF, for example, the Pan-Niger Delta Forum. You mentioned that they're setting up a reconciliation committee. What would be the point of that committee if there isn't a crisis? There is a political crisis and everybody can see it. Is that, though, the more hopeful sign, what people like PAN-DEF are doing, of a possible, if tenuous, peace between Mr. Wike and Mr. Fubara in Rivers State? What is your assessment?
Yeah, Mr. Charles, first of all, let me address the issue. Yeah, I'm not downplaying nothing. Like I said, the threat was against Wike and the federal government. And what's the reason? Because the issue of local government allocation. Who filed the suit? Was it Wike? It was the assembly. Martin Amehule and co, 27 lawmakers that filed the suit. It's got nothing to do with Wike, so it's not about downplaying it. Of course, we know there's a political crisis between both of them, but he has also been very careful not to show himself that much. Now, we are also not looking at the real issues, and that's why people can wake up and begin to make allegations. The real issues are clear. Who is the governor?
I really apologize.
Is the governor functioning? Is there a state assembly? Hold on, Charles.
Right,
Hold on. No, I'm not.
Hold on.
I just want to clear.
Wait a minute. I apologize for interrupting you, but we've got less than 4 minutes to go. We've got less than 4 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk about
and
the
so
PAN-DEF.
what I need you to do is to answer the question about PAN-DEF, the Niger Delta Pan-Niger Delta Forum. Okay. Is that a hopeful sign of a tenuous peace between Wike and Fubara in Rivers State? In your assessment, we've got to move on, I'm afraid.
Ordinarily, PAN-DEF should be able to handle that, but unfortunately, I think they went overboard. There were comments by even some of the leaders of PAN-DEF. We've heard Chief Edwin Clark say stuff. We've heard the likes of Sarah Ibe take side. We've also heard some other leaders who are supposed to be members of the PAN-DEF in the Rivers State chapter, say take sides. And then I don't know how it's going to be that the same organization is now going to set up a reconciliatory committee. What reconciliatory committee are we talking about? Is it going to be different from the kind that the president tried to make? I mean, they've crossed the red lines, and I think that the only solution, well, political is there, but it depends on the key players involved. If they decide that they have to put down their arms and then reconcile for the sake of the state, fine. But telling me that people who have taken sides even before now can actually make impact, I really do not believe. What I will subscribe to is for them to go back to where they started from. The president, of course, cannot stay aloof and say, well, I tried and it didn't work out. He can do that again, call the parties together, and then find out why the peace resolution didn't work. And then I think that everybody is beginning to realize that those people who were busy screaming it's not unconstitutional for the president to intervene are now beginning to realize the need for peace and for reconciliation. And maybe that's why Pandef is coming in. So I think they should actually go back to where they started from and then take it from there. And then maybe Pandef also could be invited to be part of that meeting at the villa. So that's for me. Otherwise, anything they are doing now is just it's neither here nor there because they've already taken sides. How do you think a Wike will want to attend a meeting, a reconciliatory meeting with Pandef leading when they have already indicted him that he is the cause of the problem? I don't see that happening. The Wike I know would do that. Yeah. Okay.
Well, just very, very briefly, we've got about 30 seconds. Going beyond the points that you're making, and back to the Niger Delta Development Force that issued this threat, whether we should take it seriously or not, looking at the state of the economy and oil theft, for example, in Rivers State where you are, Nigeria really can't afford an attack on its oil installations right now, can it? Briefly.
If we want to take it even from what you've just talked about, the economy, it's obvious that some persons already understand this and know that the president is worried about reduction in production of oil, which is affecting our economy. So it's something that people could just sit down and say, look, if we do this, it's going to be like a blackmail weapon against the president and maybe for the president to step in. I don't know the efforts they've made to bring in the president again since after the failed peace talk. So it's also possible that somebody somewhere is trying to cash into the situation in order to get the president to say, look, gentlemen, we need to stop this. But again, where are the laws? If we keep doing that, that means we've rendered the judiciary impotent, So that is part of it. So I think that the security agencies need to really get to the root of it. Even if it's a political whatever strategy by any group, they need to find out those behind it. And then the people who are making the threats shouldn't be acting like they are bandits. They should be able to show up and then have some kind of, a dialogue with the authorities and even with the parties involved. They may not even understand what the real issues are and they are just making threats. So it's possible for them to be part of it if they can show face. We have passed that era of faceless groups threatening the region. I think what has happened in Niger Delta in the past few years has really changed the narrative. We are no longer living in that order. Things have changed.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. Chief Obi Ndukwe is a leading Niger Delta analyst who regularly assesses developments in Rivers State. She's also the editor-in-chief of the Beam newspaper, and she was talking to me on the line there from the Rivers State capital, Port Harcourt.